Hello, and welcome to Game Guru and the Twitch broadcast. Can't tell you which number it is, I can't remember. But I'll tell you what I can say. I can say what I'm going to talk about. On request, somebody wanted to know about buildings and doors and how to make a door in a building and make the door open and have the logic and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to show you how most people do that. And then I'm going to deep dive into a little bit of technology on the tech side, just to show what an artist might need to do, or even someone who wants to create their own models and then be able to import those into Game Guru, and so you can have your own buildings, your own doors, and that sort of thing. So once again, welcome to the Twitch. You can ask your questions in the live chat area, and I have a moderator. Kindly in the form of Ravy, who'll answer any questions if I don't catch them. Stick a question mark in there and then I'll scan through and answer anything, or even demonstrate something live with Game Guru if you want to see something specific, or you want to interrupt me and ask some more details about something that I may have just skipped over briefly. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the software. You would launch it from Steam. I'm going to launch it from Windows Explorer, where I find I spend most of my time, one reason or another. And as I said, I'm going to show you the simple version first. That is the one that everybody can use. And you don't have to script, you don't have to model, you just have to drag some things in and away you go. So if you're not familiar, I mean, we're into a second batch of broadcasts now, and this may be your first one. You're wondering what is going on. Well, what it is, it's a game maker, and we've made it really, really easy for you to make a game. So imagine you had a game where you started here, you had to follow a path, and then get to there. We've made it easy so you can have a start position. We'll also say we wanted a win position, so if you actually cross this line, then you've actually won the game. And maybe along the way you have to overcome tremendous obstacles like this wall. And if I press test game, you will actually be able to play your game. You didn't have to program anything, you didn't have to create any art, you didn't have to do any research. All you had to do was watch this Twitch broadcast, listen to me witter on for a couple of minutes, and then get Game Guru, and then make a game and think level complete triggered. And when you finished your game, obviously you want to do a little bit more than this in terms of game content. You can actually save this as a standalone executable, and you can share it and sell it royalty free, no problems at all. Where when you actually cross that finish line, you will get a nice game over screen, which you can also customize as well, which was also covered in another Twitch broadcast. So that gives you basically a quick introduction in just a few minutes of what Game Guru is. And one of the requests was, what if I've got a building or some sort of obstacle and I want to be able to have a door, and I want to be able to create a door, and what is a door? What makes a door rather than just a static piece of scenery like this? So what I'm going to do is demonstrate it via a piece of building. If I go to add new entity and go to Asylum in the Buildings folder, you'll notice you've got what I like to call early prefabs, the building blocks which you can make larger buildings with. And in this vein, we're going to do things in the future that improve upon the idea that you can take these large building blocks and click them together to form much larger structures. But for now and right now, I'm showing you this because I want door frame exterior, which is this entity here. So if I just drop that down and then use the right mouse button to zoom in, you can see we've got a kind of a little bit of a door like that. And now we can move it. We've got a widget just to move it like that, and we can rotate it if we wanted to. A little bit of a rotation, and what we can do maybe is put a wall on that side of it. Zoom out of it with the mouse wheel, and maybe put a wall on this side of it. And obviously you could carry on and build a whole building. I just wanted to show you the door. So if I pressed test game now, it will analyze that, it will optimize the geometry and Now our level contains a makeshift door and some walls. And of course, because there's no door, you can run straight through it. Or you can just run around the wall. But obviously, this is a sort of a level in progress. And the door for this isn't in the same folder. If you go to add a new entity, you'll find it under a category called fixtures. I think of fixtures as things like shelves and bits of building material and sort of first fix stuff. So we have a door here called double doors animated. Now this door was actually designed at the same time as the asylum graphics, which means of course that it can actually fit the hole like that. So we can drop that one in, get rid of a copy. The reason I had a copy there is I held down shift. It's sort of a habit. If you just clicked it without holding down shift, it would just plonk it down and you wouldn't have a second copy of it. So there we go. And we'll move the marker a little bit closer so we're not constantly running to it. I can rotate it. Remember, always save. Saving is good. Saving is your friend. And then we'll see what happens. Now remember, I've not done any scripting, not done any art. All I've done is just drop down some entities. But this door knows it's a door. It already has the logic of a door. So you can see there's a message at the bottom. Press E to open door. Press E on the keyboard. And the door opens and we can leave or enter. So you can press E again to close it and you won't be able to get through the door until you open it. So that's really the idea. And obviously you're going to need to have a building and a door probably created by the same artist, because the door needs to fill the gap of the hole that the building has. So if a building has 5 doors, or rather 5 holes where a door should be, then the space of those holes need to be filled exactly with the door that you've chosen. So ideally it's from the same artist, so they've already kind of anticipated it. But I'm going to show you the mechanics now. Obviously this piece, as you see, it's glowing red. That means it's static entity. That means it's just baked into the scene when you start the game. And the door is green. That means it's dynamic. That means at some point you'll be able to animate it, move it, destroy it. All the things that you may want to do to change its state. Whereas the red ones, as soon as you drop those in, they will never ever leave the level. They'll be solid. You can't destroy them, you can't move them, and they will always have their collision on. You'll always be able to hit that as a wall. You will never be able to go through it. But the green ones you've got more flexibility with. And to demonstrate that, if we go to properties, you'll notice that in the AI system, default.lua, we use default.lua script when you actually don't want to do anything. The script is actually completely empty. It's a script with nothing in it. So that's your typical script for anything that's static. You might argue, why have a script at all? Well, it ignores the default.lua. It doesn't actually do anything, so it's not going to interfere with your engine in any way. So if we go to properties on the door, see, highlight the door and click properties, you see that you've got a door.lua, which is the door script. But it gets better than that. If I highlight over it and look at the bottom of the screen, you can actually see it says double doors, animated, and it's dynamic. And what I want to do is navigate and show you all the elements of the door equation. We'll ignore the building or the wall with the hole in it for a minute. That's just a standard static entity. You can create that geometry in any modeler, import it as an X file, and then you can just drop it in with the texture and it'll be fine. But the door is the one I think we want to focus on because it's the tricky one. So if we go to Entity Bank and go to Fixtures, where we found the door before, scroll down to D, and we're looking for double doors animated.fpe. And if we open up, I'll just describe what these files are initially. You've got a .bmp file, that's the little picture that you see in the entities. If I went to select another door, you'll actually see this little picture. That's what that BMP is right there. The FPE is a description of the entity, its default state. And a lot of these values are exposed in the entity properties dialog. but there's additional ones in here that you won't find, such as the specifying the shader, which shader it's used. And even though it says character_basic, all that means is it's using a shader that knows how to animate an object, and the character basic shader is the only shader that knows how to animate an object, which is why it's being used here. But there's no harm in sort of copying that file shader and then modifying it a little bit specifically for your needs if you needed to, but you don't need to. Modifying shaders isn't really a requirement at this stage with Game Guru. And you'll notice further down it specifies door.lure, like so. It also specifies some other things, like it specifies doors_animated.x, and it also specifies door_d.dds. Now the .x is the model. If I double click it, I've got a little model viewer called affectionately called ASIMP, Asset Import Library, and this is the little GUI front end for it. And you see it's not textured, it's just the geometry, that's all it is. The texture for it would be door_d.dds, and you'll notice there's accompanying _n for normal maps and _s for specular. So as you're getting into art, or you may know an artist, they'll know what these three files actually mean and what they do. But when you add them all together, the thumbnail, the FPE descriptor, the X file for the geometry and the textures, you'll actually end up with all the ingredients minus one. Remember the door.lure? Well, that will actually be found in script bank. Click for door.lure, open that up, and what you have is a little program that the computer can run to say how should this door act. And I won't go into details. The previous broadcast we really went into details how we could change this and make the door do clever and wonderful things. All you really need to be aware of are things like play animation. So set animation 0, so it says choose the first animation and then play that animation. And if we look further down, there'll be one called set animation 1, which is the animation for closing, and then it says go forth and play the closing animation. And 0 and 1 is actually specified in the FPE because it's related to the entity. So that, I think, is here. Double doors animated.fpe. If we scroll to the bottom, you've got an anim section. Anim 0 is frames 0 to 50, and anim 1 is frames 51 to 100. So you can imagine when the door animates from 0 to 50 frames, it will open, and then once it's open, 51 to 100 will close it again. That's one way to animate a door, and it's the one the artist has chose to do on this particular occasion, but it's not the only one. If I actually run the game again, cancel this and run it, I want to show you something very specific about this door. It's a double door, so the doors open both ways, and I can imagine that's why the artist decided to animate it like so. You see, it swings open, all very nice. But if we actually look at the entity itself, let's drag another one in, and I rotate it, look, it rotates around its centre. If you was doing a door that was only a single door that opened on its hinge on one side, you might be tempted to put the centre point for this object on one of the axes, on one of the edges of the door. That way it will actually rotate around its axis, around its hinge, which can be very useful if you want to hang the door on different places. And if you had such a door, there's something else you can do. In addition to animating, which you may not be comfortable doing, you can actually use the lure script to animate the door. And I'm just looking at the time. We do have time. I am actually going to try this by taking this door and then I'm going to animate it. I'm trying to think, is there a better entity I can use to describe it? Because what you really want is an entity where the axis is on one side, but this is in the centre. But I think we'll just live with it. I think what we'll do is we'll first of all create a new entity. So if we go to... actually no, I think what we could do is just do a new script. That'd be quicker. So we go to that door one again, door.lure, Control C, Control V, we'll copy and we'll just give it another name, something we can use to spoil this script, Dolly. If you remembered a previous broadcast, in fact the last one from this one, what you have to do when you actually rename the file is also copy it into the script. Otherwise it just won't work, it won't recognise any of the code in here. So instead of animating, I'm going to leave this all the same. You run up to it, you press E, it opens the door. What I'm going to do is that when you get here, instead of animating the door open, what I'd like to do is rotate the door. And I bet you're wondering how that can be done. And if we go to the script bank again and go into global.lua, you actually see you've got all the commands that you'll be able to use. And I know for a fact one of these allows me to rotate entities. But because there's so many of them, I very quickly forget the actual command names. So you see we've got a selection here. We've got set rotation XYZ, which will set an absolute position for the entity X, Y and Z angle, and you got rotate Y. Now I think rotate Y is an incremental one. It will actually add a rotation value onto its existing angle. So I think we'll start with this one because I think it'll be much more fun to play with that one. It takes two parameters, E and V, E being the entity index and V being the number we want to do. So just for starters, let's just get rid of the animation. Maybe rotate it 45 degrees and then it's instantly going to go on. So I just want to, this is sort of a great way of you starting out in scripting and programming. Take something that works and then modify little bits of it and just see what happens. So it's door.lee.lua. Now we mustn't forget to change the script on the door. We'll leave that one alone. And what we'll do, we'll have a new door. We'll move it over here somewhere. And we will set the properties. See where it says door.lua at the moment? We're going to change it so it actually says door underscore lee.lua. And voila. So now what we can do is move the start marker and then we're going to press test game and then see what happens. That wasn't the game door, that was my actual real door. Just so you're wondering why there was an extra feature there. Now remember we've just hacked the script now, it's going to do something different. It's not going to animate it, it's still going to do everything else. It's going to set active states and switch collision off, but now it's going to do that rotate Y command that I just hacked in and I have no idea what it's going to do yet. I'm just going to press it and see what happens. Right, did you see that? A very slight movement. Very slight movement. So maybe we need to set a flag and have it constantly call that command. Let's see what happens when we do that. How would we do that? Well, Lua's pretty cool. You can come up with anything you like. So if we had door underscore lee underscore flag equals 0, I've just created a global, which is a variable. It's sort of a box that can store a number. So it's currently initialized at 0, but as soon as we open the door, we're going to set that number to a 1, which is great. But it's not going to do anything just setting a value to 1. I mean, what the game actually do? Nothing. So you have to tell it what to do when it's 1. So if we do an if statement and say if this value which we just set becomes 1 for whatever reason, then you're going to execute rotate Y. Let's have 45. Let's make a nice small value. Let's say 10. And then we save that. Always remember to save. And then run test game again. And in theory, as soon as you press E, it opens the door. It sets the flag to 1. When the flag is set to 1, it will do that rotate Y command lots and lots. So let's see what happens when it does that. Cool. So there you are. It's now going to continue to rotate like a revolving door forever, but I think it's a little bit slow, so let's make it a little bit faster. Let's set it up to 100 and save that and then run that, because you know you're playing a game, you don't want to wait 3 hours just for a door to open. I think there'd be better things for your player to do. So we press E. Yes, that's more like it. So now I've just set it spinning and it will always spin. Now the thing is, what you're going to do, just wait for your time and then rush through the gap. Doesn't matter because we switch collision off on the door, so you can just run straight through it like so. But we wanted it more for a cosmetic effect, for an animation of a door opening. Now remember, we're assuming this door, two things are different. One, there's no animations to it, and two, it's hinged on the left or the right bracket. So we only want the door to open for a while. We only want to open it, say, for 90 degrees. How would we do that? Well, I've a little experience with programming, and I know for a fact that if we change this condition to say, instead of if it equals 1, if it's greater than 0, which 1 certainly is, then we'll go inside the actions for this. So all the instructions inside this little nest will be executed. And what I want to do is increment that value by 1. And then continue to rotate. Now, if this value is less than 90 degrees, let's call it degrees. Of course it isn't. It absolutely isn't degrees. It's just a counter. It starts at 0 and it will go up and up and up. And it will continue to go up. You've noticed that this is outside of this condition. So it will keep adding 1 every time it runs this script over and over and over again. And this script is called every frame. And if your game's running at 60 frames per second, it will actually call this script 60 times in a second. So you can imagine this is just a counter incrementing quite fast. You get 60 counts every second. But if we put it inside there, then you actually have a different story. It will only do 90 of these calls, rotate Y 100, and then it will stop. And that's what we kind of want. So if we save that and then run test game, by my calculations, if it ran at 60 frames per second, which you can find by pressing the tab key, so we're currently running at 106 frames per second. So that's not 60 frames per second, that's 90. So you can imagine this door would open for about 1 second, rough calculation, and then it should stop rotating. So let's see if that's true. Yeah, perfect. My maths is not flawed. So you can imagine if that was hinged on the edge, then it would open. And maybe I can demonstrate it with a little bit of a visual cheat. I mean, we can assume you can see that half at door, but not the other half, yeah? Like that. This is a massive, massive cheat, you understand. Please do not think this is how you are now supposed to create computer games. It's for want of an artist, really, because I'm not an artist. It was suggested that I actually break out the old Blender and start showing you how to create models and things. But really, that's not my forte, and I would probably be wasting your time. I do know someone who is rather good at it, and I'm going to try and convince said person to indulge us and show us how we would create these things. Because I think that would be useful to not only see how the entities and the scripts work, but also, let's see if we can get that right, also how they're actually originated. So I don't know if you can guess what I'm about to attempt to demonstrate. We know it actually spins and rotates 90 degrees, and we'll see one half of the door. Now the other half of the door I'm hoping hides behind that wall. So we open it. Yeah. So we'll just move the door a little bit this way. Run it again. Try it now. Move the wall a bit. I think the reason it didn't register, and I can show you that, is the door needs line of sight to the player. Yeah. I'll show you the command for that. If you go back into the script and go to the top, look, there's a line. Here it is, get entity player visibility. The reason that's being used is if you have a door above you on the next floor, you can't possibly see it, which means you can't possibly open it. But it still might be within range if, say, you jump or you was climbing on a box and you was right near the ceiling. It might be within 100 units of the door. And you don't really want it to say, would you like to open the door, when you can't possibly see it, which is what that one's there for. But because we want to do this massive hack, we're going to cheat and ask that you don't even need to know whether it's visible or not. And essentially what I've done there now, although it's very complicated, if the condition is 1, so it's always going to be true. It will always be true. In fact, can we do true? That might work, but you could try that at your own time. Then obviously completes that, and then the dash dash is everything else after it is a comment. It means it ignores the rest of that line. So we'll save it. And now it shouldn't require player line of sight in order to detect whether you're near the door. Yes. What you're looking at here is... Oh, I know what it is. You're looking at real development. This is where 99% of the time it goes wrong. Yeah, I've changed the wrong line. It's actually that one. Okay, let's try again. 4th time's a charm. Please! Yay! Nearly there. Let's just zoom in and move that gap back in. I think that one was right. And if we can move this one to close it up, maybe this one can close the gap on this side. the narrowest door in the world. And as you can see, I mean, this is an awful lot of faffing about because I just don't have the tools. What you really want is a modeler and an animator and someone who get like sizes and units and stuff right and create doors and create buildings with holes in that are the same size as the doors. So with a little bit of artist knowledge, yes, you'll be able to do all this yourself. So as you can see, we can't get through. Can we press E? It opens. We can get through. Hooray! So yeah, massive hack, but you can kind of see what would happen if you now look, try to press E to close it, but you can guess why you can't do that. So we look up where the bit where you want to detect it for when it's closed. I think it's down here. You see you've got player visible again, so we make sure that's always true. Save and run. So in terms of modifying geometry, this is as most as you're going to get out of me for the moment. So you press E to open the door and oh, come on. Yes. Oh, of course. Can anyone now guess? You see, to close the door, it's thinking it's has to use its animation trick. Yeah? Now the problem is, it didn't use the animation to open it, so why am I thinking running the second animation will somehow close it? What we have to do is set this rotation back where it came from. Now I'm going to use the same variable because I like to save globals. I don't like to use too many globals. So it's less than 90, so it increments 1. It stops at 90, right? Okay, so will never be a condition where it's greater than 90, you see, because it stopped at 90. But what could push it over 90? Well, what if we actually set it to 91 here, manually, when you try to close it? Boosh. So now I've pushed it over. Now all the commands inside here will be true. And if we push that on to, say, 180, so what you can do is chain conditions together. So not only does it have to be greater than 90, it has to be less than 180. And we continue adding the counter, and this time we'll do rotate minus 100. That would reverse all the damage that we've done, and it should close the door. So we'll run this. It's only right I show you how to close a door, having showed you how to script it open. So press E to open it, and then in theory, if you press E, yeah. Oh, what I did mention at the start of this Twitch is this is entirely, completely unrehearsed broadcast. You're seeing it as I'm seeing it, so when it goes wrong for all of us. Fortunately, this is what I do in such situations. I need to know the value of this because I think that's the cause. So prompt is a command which will draw some text to the screen, and dot dot is a concatenator which will add variable value onto a string and then print the whole lot out. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to know whether, when I try and close the door, is that door flag being changed. Say we've got door leave flag equals 0 when I press the E key. Obviously you can't see press E to open because I'm overriding that status message with my debug stuff, which is used in the prompt command. So if I press E, it'll still work even though it doesn't print the text. And it stops at 90. Now if I press E again, it should go to 91 and then increase to 180. So I'm pressing E like a crazy person, nothing's happening. So that tells me why, or at least narrows down the problem. You see, I'm thinking this is the line that's going to execute and close the door, but for some reason it's not doing it. Absolutely not doing it. So maybe we need more information. Well, the way you need to know that is find out all the other variables that would cause you to get to this point. So we need to know what press E is doing. And when you do that, you concatenate another string equals. So we can find out whether we press the key and it's 1. But there's other things as well. Look, there's this condition. Activated has to be 2 before it goes into any of this stuff. So let's find out what that does. So we go dot dot. What does that variable contain? I said variable, it's not a variable. That's actually an array indexed by the entity that you're currently using. So every entity can have its own grab bag of variables. There's ones we provide that you can just have access to, but you can actually create your own arrays using the same index. So now we've got E, so that works, and now it's 2, so that condition's true. E, yeah, E is 1 as well. So those two conditions are satisfied. So maybe we need to look for another condition which is stopping us actually doing this. So if we look at this condition, so what's the opposite end of that else? So if it's not 1, which is true, what's the end of this else? This is another 1. Activated equals 0. And what's this one? Player distance is less than and player health. What if it's player distance? What if it's player distance? So let's pop that right at the beginning because that's the one we really want to find out about right now. And you notice all the text was squashed together, so you can put little 2 spaces at the start of each next thing. That'll just make it a bit neater. So this is how one way of actually debugging Lua script, by using the prompt command. So as we move closer, you've got to be less than 100, so press E. And every time we go to this side, look, it's less than 100, press E. E is 1, entity is 2, yeah. You know what it could be? It could be some other logic that's stopping that variable ever always being. Okay. So it's not getting there. Here's another way of doing some debugging. Put the prompt command inside where you think it's actually getting up to. So if we put it there and this debug material appears, then we know we're at least this far into the script. Actually, I've had a really good idea as this is live. Let's see if someone can post a solution before I get to it, because they've already seen what the problem is. Okay, so we've definitely got that far in the process, which is good. That's where we want to be. So we go down another stage. We know we're in 2. Do we get this far? Save, run. Just reading one of Ravi's posts. I saw a timer as you were scrolling up and down. Could be that. Yes, it could be. It could be. I'm right near that now. So I press E. It's definitely there. So we've got to that far in the script. So we're only one step away from actually triggering door leave flag equals 91. So it's one of these 3. Oh, look what it is. Or what it might be. Animating. See that? That might be the condition. That's being a silly bugger. We know it's not the others, so I can delete all this now, because it's getting a bit long. And instead I want to find out about that one. Let's just call it animating. I also want to find out what door pressed is whilst I'm at it, so I'm not having to run this test too many times. Excellent. Let's run that. My guess is animating is 1 or something. In fact, I pretty much know it is. I'll just had an epiphany. Press E. The animating is 1. Why is it 1, considering we didn't actually do the play animation command? Well, if we go to lower is quite powerful, and it allows you to actually override the base values that are inside. And look what I'm doing here. Animating equals 1. I'm actually setting the flag here, which is absolutely preventing me from passing that condition down there. And as we're not animating, we'll lump that with those to say we don't need animations anymore. So let's just make sure we obliterate that code from all over the place. We'll get rid of it from there as well. And now that condition should be satisfied. And I'm so confident I'm going to remove the prompt. So confident he is. Drum roll. Walkie walkie. Open E. Press E again. Awesome. Oh, look, and you can walk straight through the closed door, so there's probably a collision command we need to throw on. Collision on. If time is greater than 100, then collision off. So I presume that's switching it off after you've actually switched it on. But just to be a hacky git, I'll just do that. In fact, just to make absolutely sure that door is now impenetrable, the third condition, along the lines of, if you are 180 or above, then the door is sealed forever. There you go. That is definitely one way of making sure you can't walk through that door. But obviously there's a little bit of a logic issue in the script, and it would just take the same process. You go through, you find out what is that isn't happening. So close the door and you can just run straight through it. Hooray! But I won't dwell. I think my point about using rotation commands to open and close a door has been pretty well explained. I'm going to see if the object has a text file format, because I can actually show you even deeper into this subject. I do hope it is. So we've got to fixtures, we've got to double door, animated. You can actually open it in Notepad. Now, this is binary. I mean, it looks like sort of Asian text, but actually this is just all the crazy character codes to basically say this is binary and it's not text and you can't read it. But if you're lucky, sometimes an X file can be exported as a text file, and inside that text file it breaks down all the animation data of that object, and you can very carefully scrutinize whether, let's say you did a rotation, so 0 frame it's 0 angle, and then at frame 90 it's 90 degrees, and then at frame 100 or something it's back to 0. You'll actually be able to see that in the text. It's a pretty cool way to further scrutinize the files you've got before you go forth and start creating all these really cool dynamic objects in your game. So that's what I was hoping to demonstrate. If people want to see more about this, we do have the idea that perhaps Ravi could demonstrate creating a building with a hole in it and a separate door hinged correctly, and how to import that, and then that broadcast should marry up well with this one, which shows you how to actually get it in your game and get it working, and using scripts to modify that door. But that's only if people want it. And you can post about that in the forum. I think I've left the page open. No, I didn't. If you go to forums, it's pretty easy to find. Product chat, and then it's stick it at the top. So if we go down to one of the many stickies, the ones with the little green things on, you'll actually find it here, right at the top, of course. Twitch sessions, please send your requests. So just post them here. And I remember viewing this a little bit earlier. The request for this one came in through another source, but I did browse through this, and one of them was touching on the subject about using the a building and then dropping it in, making it enterable. Again, I think that's really the job of someone who knows a little bit more about modelling. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe we will throw in a little bit of this spawning. I think I know what you mean. I'll probably give it 5-10 minutes and see where we go with it. And if I fail, I fail. We just ran out of time and maybe we can tag it on to a future broadcast. But before I do that, I just want to check the messages. Because this is live after all, and I do want to help. If you've got a question that you want answered immediately, then I will be happy to do that through the medium of Game Guru. So I'm just going to scroll up, look for any question marks. Lots of cools and lols, so it looks like people were enjoying that. As crazy as it was. Got a For the People Studios, will you please show us how to use times to make a kill streak? I mean, I have most of the code as of now, I just need to be on a timer. Yeah, I can demonstrate some timer stuff really quickly. Let's reuse door script, because otherwise it would be a very long time. And what we'll do is, instead of flagging the door to close when we press the E, we'll flag the door to close after a certain amount of time. And to ensure we're not going to be disturbed with all these other timers, I'm going to just comment them out. So we go to the top. You've got set activated, get, blah blah blah. Start timer. We don't want that to start timer there. We don't want to deal with timers here. And we don't want to start a timer there. Okay, cool. So now what we're going to do is, when you open the door and you increment, at some point you're going to get to the end where the door is actually open, right? In fact, let's make it easier than that. When you actually open the door, because you set door fleet flag to blah, then we start a timer, which starts a timer in milliseconds, so it will start ticking. And this timer is per entity. Each entity can have their own timer. So you just start running the timer, tick, tick, tick. And then, fortunately, we have all this code we can cut and paste. We can say when the timer gets bigger than a certain value in milliseconds. Now currently it's just 1000, which is 1 second. That's not enough. Let's say 4 seconds, something will happen. The something I want to happen is that door flag is set to 91, as if we closed it. So that's timer country. So let's see if that works. Now obviously, when you run code like this, other code may try and defeat the code you just added. You know, code will stand on each other's toes. It loves banging into each other, so you just have to make sure that your conditions are explicit and that your actions are not going to be confused with other actions. So we press open, we're going to wait 4 seconds. Exactly, you see, my conditions were not explicit enough, so it's just going to keep trying to close the door forever. So a simple condition, we could take care of that. You see, the timer is always going to be greater than 4, because I'm not resetting it, you see. So one more thing you have to do to make sure that it only really happens, this trigger only happens once. And it's quite simple. You reset the timer, so now it's false. But you see, it won't be false for long, will it? Because you've started the timer, so another 4 seconds, it will try and close the door again. How do you solve that? Well, there's only one condition you actually are interested in, that's when the door is open. And we know the door is open when door leave flag is 90. So we set an explicit condition where this can only really be called once. You reset that timer, happy days. In fact, you don't even need start timer anymore, because this condition is only ever happening at this place when the door is open. So when it's set to 91, it's always moving forward this counter, it never moves back. So that should be enough. Let's see what happens. One of my customary missing of the thens. Lua isn't a very strict language, but it does insist on a few things, like having thens at the end of your if conditions. So I just want to make sure we have the then, and also when you're comparing, it's double equals, not single equals. I think that was it. Let's try that out. And now we can open the door, and then 4 seconds time it closes. And that's how simple timers work. So if you was having a situation where you wanted to spawn lots of creatures for a minute, then you just set the timer off, and then for as long as the timer is less than 60,000 as a value, you can keep doing all your spawn stuff. And I have actually done experiments with spawning, and you can actually kill characters and then respawn them with new health, and they come back to life and carry on. So you don't need to plant 1,000,000 zombies into a level. You could put 5 zombies into a level and just keep reusing them over and over and over again. You can even move the position of them as well. So you can move them into different spots and maybe use some markers to kind of indicate where those spots are going to be, so you can actually place the positions visually, but use the script to actually make it a little clever. So let me just carry on with the questions. I kind of want to get them all answered before we get to the end of our 1 hour broadcast. It's supposed to be a 30 minutes broadcast, by the way, but you know me, I do like to chat. Just going to read through. Yeah, Ravi was suggesting it was a timer issue. It was actually an animating flag issue, as it turns out. Scrolly, catchy monkey. Yep, hopefully I've showed some timers. Have you got any more questions? Just drop it in at the end if I've not answered it thoroughly. I would like to make sure that the question was properly answered. Okay, here we got a new question from LansJohn123. Is a search function likely to become available for the assets so you could locate all the doors in one search, for example typing door? Well, there's 2 ideas we had, and let me just zoom out like so. One is in the entities themselves. So let's say you're here, you've already got a shortlist for purchases, which we thought was a really good, cool idea. Every time you bought something, it actually puts it in reverse order of purchases, so it's in chronological order. So that one there, the MFC Desert Camera Open, that was the last thing I bought or downloaded from the store, and that's why it's here in this. What we're thinking is maybe another one, a little search box, so you could tap out what you're interested in, and it searches the entire library, and then just shortlists the thumbnails of the ones that you're actually interested in. But there's another search thing, which I think one you might be interested in. Let's say I dropped a door here, 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 and here, and then I'm somewhere else in the map, and I kind of want to know where my doors are. Right now, there's really no way for you to know. Unless you actually know exactly where you put them all, you're just going to have to go and find them one by one. But there is actually a technique how you can actually delete them all. Let's say you don't want any doors in your level. You've decided you've had enough. But there's a really clever trick, and I think I've got time to show you. By no means a replacement for search, but search would require a lot more user interface stuff and a lot of design and maybe a consultation with the community to make sure that we're putting the right kind of search feature in. But if you wanted to get rid of all these doors, this is how you do it, and it's a little bit hacky, but bear with me. What you can do is go to where the door is in the entity library, because it's going to look for double doors when it loads it, you see, and just change the name a little bit, like underscore Lee. I've just completely disabled the entity now. The DBO is just temporary file, you can delete that just for fun. But because I've changed the name, if I try to load this level in again, so if I open test1. Watch what's going to happen. You see, a log file's been produced. It can't find the entity. So what does it do? It removes the entities from the level because obviously it's not a valid entity anymore. And then what you can do is save the level. Now watch what happens. It notices you've got an invalid entity. Now it doesn't save it until you click save, because you may have just misplaced an entity and you kind of want to put it back in your entity library and all is forgiven and your level won't get messed up. But because we clicked save, we deliberately said I want to now remove all the invalid entities, and so it did. So now it's removed the door. So now the last thing you do is you restore the name of the entity, and now you got your door back. So when we look in our not buildings, it's in fixtures, and we click it in, we've got our door back. So that's a nice easy way to get rid of all them nuisance entities that you now get rid of. You don't have to search for them individually, you can wipe them all out in one almighty swoop. So hopefully that was a little bit of a tidbit that probably wasn't public knowledge up until this point. I wrote this, just don't know how to get it on a timer. That was from Father People Studios, who wants to do sort of a spawning run with all the characters spawning under a certain amount of time. Well, yeah, it's just do command start timer and get timer, and you can actually control that. And it says it's driving him nuts. We've got a question from a Wanderer 189. Last week Twitch was about quests. Is there a global command to play a WAV or OGG file rather than a text on the screen? Is there a global command for it? No. There isn't, in the sense that you've got like a WAV file that can be played just in the void. It has to always be associated with an entity. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. For example, an example of, I think what you're asking for, if you drop in a sound zone, go to properties, and you can see you've got sound, audio bank misc, sound trigger.wav. That would actually play that WAV as soon as you walk into that zone. But if you actually looked at the script for it, soundinzone.lua, and you'll find that in the script bank, soundinzone.lua, that's the command, play sound. But it's not play sound and then the name of your WAV, because that would be odd. Because you can construct strings dynamically in Lua, Lua would have to load sounds in real time. It would have to load sounds in the middle of your game. And one thing you do not do is generate or load anything in your game's main loop. It slows things down. So by using an index 0, and that 0 being filled in here, the engine has an opportunity to preload the WAV file so that when you enter this zone, or whether you issue that command in Lua from anywhere, it will look at its associated entity and then find the WAV that's already preloaded and play it. So that's how you do it. And using a combination of those two things, you can pretty much play any sound you want instead of text on the screen, which I think is much more preferable if you're doing like a quest system and having people talk to you. Got 5 minutes left. Another question. Also, are there any objects that will act like a radio? We have sound 0 and 1, but nothing more than that. Well, you could actually just record something like 60 seconds of just radio static or chatter, save it as an OGG file because it's better compression with almost perfect quality, and then you just have it so you trigger the sound to play and just leave it on a loop. And the command for that, I think, is loop sound. If we go back to global.lua and look forward, I think it's loop sound. Yeah. So you just get any entity with a script that plays loop sound with your 60 seconds of OGG radio chatter. It will just play that radio over and over and over again. And then if you want to die it out, you can set a volume based on distance and all that really cool stuff. I can imagine what you mean. You walk into a room and you can hear a radio and you can switch it on and off and it gets fainter as you walk further away from it. Yes, you can do all that, but you'd need to create the WAV file for the radio and then use the commands I've pointed out in order to make it do stuff. Got a question from AOF520. 1. Is there a way to increase the size of the paintbrush? 2. How can you decrease the size of the map? The paintbrush is an easy one. I'll just zoom to the top. You've got paintbrush, as you know, it's like this. If you press the plus key, it gets bigger. And if you press the minus key, it gets really small. Like that. So that's how you would change the brush size. Size of the map. Yeah, it is pretty big. Big enough for most medium-sized levels. Now remember, you don't have to fit your whole game in this level. This is just one level. And when you want bigger, you just make another level and chain the levels together to make a sequence of events in your game. So that's how you would go about making large ones. For making small ones, my recommendation is you simply fence off large quantities of your level. Now what I've just done here, I've increased the terrain so it's really high, then use this next one which copied the height, and then I can use the third one which remembers the height I've just copied. And what I've just done there, I've just made a small level. Because there's absolutely no way, unless you've got a rocket launcher, or, sorry, a jetpack, or you've got the power of flight, that you're ever going to escape my level. Providing you stick the start marker inside it and press test game, you've just made your level smaller. If you was worried about levels being big, that's slowing down your game right now, we are working on some major performance improvements which should mitigate most of those concerns. So you won't need to make the terrain smaller to improve your performance, because we're actually working on that. And down the road we're going to completely replace the terrain system with something which gives you almost an infinite number of textures you can paint it with, and a lot more controls for the nuances of the geometry, and also better load handling, so you can actually fly into orbit and then look down and see, you know, a world of terrain, with a bit of streaming as well to keep it nice and low bandwidth. So you can see I've just made a really small level just by painting some massive mountains. And you can also, you know, have huge walls. You know, you could take one of our walls and then go to the scale function in the widget. Let me just get a bit closer. I'm trying to click on a pixel there. Go to scale, grab the little white circle, and there you go. You could actually just make a huge barrier and just cordon off your level in that way. So hopefully that's one way of making levels smaller. But yeah, if I wasn't clear, you've got 1 minute left to ask a better question. You can add extra sounds in the FP files. Yes, the retro game block is absolutely correct there. A lot of questions today. I'm really happy and surprised, and it's a pity that, you know, the one time I get a lot of questions, I don't have any time to answer them. But I'm certainly going to cut off the Twitch just because the hour has passed. No way. Make sure all your questions are answered. Retro Game Block, happy answering questions for people, which is great. Thanks very much. And we have one last comment. I managed to get to the end without seeing any more question marks. Hooray. This is from LansJohn123. I have created a save and load routine which loads various variables for my game, so it starts where I left off. Wow, cool. However, I can't find a way of loading in the player coordinates XYZ from where I left off. They get overridden by the start marker. Any ideas on a workaround? Yeah, I think there actually is a command for moving the player. So what you would do, set a timer, and then after, you know, 20, 30 milliseconds, then issue this command. Because if you issue it right away, I think you're right, the player position gets constituted from the start marker. But if you wait a couple of milliseconds, you might be able to get away with setting the player's position. As to how you do that, it's somewhere around here. Player stuff. Here we are. Apologies for not knowing the command off the top of my head. There are a lot of commands these days, and they're only set to increase at a phenomenal rate once we're finished with our performance work. Set player power, set player lives. You know, I could have sworn there was a set player position. In fact, there was. I remember there was a Twitch broadcast 2 or 3 weeks ago where I created a transporter, didn't I? Yes. So, oh, it was it transport? Did I actually call it trans? Yeah, or tele? Trans? Yeah, there you go. Transport to if used. Now that doesn't give you a coordinate that you can save, but I think you can be a little bit crafty here. What you can actually do is have an entity, call it, you know, floating player or something, and then you can set, with this command, set position. Set the position of this floating entity with the values that you've saved in your save and load system. And then once that entity position has been fixed, then you can use transport to if used and give it the if used property of that entity. And then you should be able to get the player to transport to an arbitrary location based on the floating location of that entity. That might do it. That may very well do it. I'm not at all sure, and it probably won't work. But it's certainly something to play around with, and if you'd absolutely want me to explore that, that's something we can maybe look at the next broadcast where I'm hosting it. So pity the what then turns to a video that you don't see the chat, because there's some really cool stuff in here, and I really can't read it all. Specifically, a link And I certainly can't read out the characters of the link. It would be impossible. And got a comment from For the People Studios. We need access to player damage and things like gun damage and script. Yeah, all those sorts of things. It's not just going to be us adding more Lua commands. That's not going to be the case. Simply because there'll be too many Lua commands. Instead, what we're planning is to externalize the hard-coded modules that control things like player and damage and weapons. So when you look at our internal Lua scripts, you'll be able to access those variables directly. You won't need commands to change them. You could change those variables on a first-hand basis. And even more so, you can take our internal Lua script and change the way the weapon system works, and way the player system works, and the collision system, and the third-party control system. All those sorts of things we're going to externalize. I think it's the better way. It allows you to have more power. We're not constantly adding commands. You just get access to the actual code that's sort of behind the commands, which I think is much more powerful. So be prepared not only for access to everything that you ever wanted, but pretty much everything else, and a lot of stuff that you probably don't want as well. So that's our plan, and we're hoping to do that immediately after the performance work. Once the performance work is out and tested and it's stable, and we haven't introduced any nasty bugs along the way, currently leading at the top of the voting board is the Save and Load, which requires a significant amount of Lua stuff, because we're not just going to create a huge text file and dump everything into it. We're actually going to do what's called a Lua snapshot and grab all the data that's stored inside Lua, and that's going to be a save position. And then anything that's not currently in Lua, in the Lua memory block, we're going to move it into. And so when you load, that's where it gets all its data from, and it regurgitates the scene from that data. So that's the plan, but we're only going to do it once the performance work is finished. Have we got a question for the People Studios? Can you tell me how to add sounds to the FPE? Can you add sounds to the FPE? Yeah, it's pretty simple. You just click on any entity, make sure it's dynamic. So static mode, no, because otherwise it will just ignore you. Apply changes, and then once you've got yourself a dynamic entity, you've got usually at the bottom, sound 0, sound 1. Just click on the right of the field, and you get a thing that pops up here. It starts you off in the audio bank, so just drop your WAV sound or your OGG sound anywhere in these folders, or create your own folder. It's absolutely fine. So you might drop it into MISC. And then you can select the WAV file that you've previously added. You click open, and then the WAV will be here. And you can have a second WAV in sound 1. So let's say I wanted to do chain gate open.wav, like that. And then all you're going to do is write a script which will do play sound 0 or play sound 1, and you can trigger those two WAVs. So that's how you do it in the entity properties. So hopefully that was helpful. And it's the end of the chat thread. It's 5 minutes past the hour, so that's when I'm going to stop, because otherwise I'll just keep talking forever. So I hope you enjoyed it. I kind of covered quite a lot of ground here, so it's going to be a very interesting title when I eventually title this broadcast. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back next Wednesday, 4 PM British Summer Time, or 5 PM GMT, if you actually follow all this crazy world clock stuff. It may not be me, it may be Ravy, probably will be me. If you want stuff on modelling, it'll be Ravy. If you want more on scripting or things to do in Game Guru, it will be me. So, yeah, it's up to you which one we talk about. So until next Wednesday, thanks for your kind attention, and I'll say goodbye.